And General Milley, General McKenzie, like my colleagues here, I want to thank you for your distinguished service to our nation. We're very grateful. I personally share your compassion and gratitude and extend my condolences to the Gold Star families here and all those who lost loved ones, the more than 2,400 who made the ultimate sacrifice over the nearly 20 years of action in Afghanistan, as well as the thousands wounded, both with injuries that are visible and those that are not. Paraphrasing some of the things that I've heard today, no single factor determined the outcome, is I think something you've said. 20 years of decisions, actions, successes, and failures all contributed to what ultimately happened in Afghanistan. You said there was a whole series of lessons along the way. And if I come to something, General Milley, I think if I got it right when you were talking with my colleague, Ranking Member Meeks, that the start of the end was the Doha Agreement in 2020. Is that fair?
I think that's a way that an historian could look at it. You could also start it in 2011 when there was a decision by the Obama administration to begin the drawdown. It's a 10-year process of drawdown. The end game itself, I would probably peg it at Doha because it's a continuum of unbroken cause and effects from that moment to at the end.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's hard to put one point, but what were your thoughts at the time of the signing of the Doha Agreement in 2020?
Well, the military was not consulted on the Doha Agreement, nor would I necessarily expect to be, but that was a State Department operation that was done under Secretary of State Pompeo with Zal Khalilzad as the ambassador to do the negotiations. I was not consulted. It was an 18-month process, so it actually begins before I became the chairman. It begins under General Dunford. So that process goes on. I don't know what General Dunford knew, but I don't think he knew much about it. We knew there was a negotiation going on, the specifics of which we didn't know the terms of the negotiation. I found out about that from Secretary Esper after the fact, and then it was then, and then a week or two later, we found we were given the classified annex to the Doha Agreement. But no, we didn't participate in the development of the terms nor the negotiations.
And when the decision was made to draw down to 2,500 troops by, I think you said, Inauguration Day, did you see that as something that was sustainable, get to the ultimate goal, or did that put U.S. forces at undue risk?
My assessment at the time was that 2,500 U.S. troops, and again, these are high-end Special Forces troops, 2,500 U.S. troops with the contractors with NATO was the min force necessary in order to buy the time to ensure the conditions were going to get met and result in a satisfactory negotiated settlement with the government of Afghanistan and the Taliban. Obviously, that didn't happen. But
at any time between the Doha Agreement and January of 21, when we were at 2,500, or even April and ongoing, was the government involved in the negotiations? Was there evidence of progress being made in the negotiations between the Taliban and the government that would give confidence that we could achieve the conditions that were laid out in the Doha Agreement?
I don't actually know that. I think that's probably a question for the State Department because they would probably have better visibility. I don't think, I'm almost positive that there were no substantive negotiations between the government of Afghanistan, the government of President Ghani, and the Taliban. Now, there may have been some back-channel stuff. There might have been some stuff that I'm not aware of. But I am not aware of substantive negotiations between the government of Afghanistan. And in fact, the Doha Agreement, that's one of the requirements, one of the conditions is that one of the conditions is a reduction in violence for a specified period of time. I think it was 90 days, if I remember. And then that was supposed to lead to a permanent countrywide ceasefire. And then that would lead to a negotiated settlement between the government of Afghanistan and the Taliban. Obviously, the Taliban didn't adhere to those conditions. They blew through those, but that was part of the Doha Agreement. And that, I think, and I know you had Dr. Khalilzad here before, I think that's kind of what he was trying to make happen, but it never happened.
I understand I'm almost out of time, but the goal was to have that negotiated agreement. The Taliban quickly, I think, recognized that they didn't need to negotiate with the government. The government was weak, and they could achieve their goals by other means. At what point, if any, and this is to both of you, would you mark the tipping point where the outcome was all but certain? It was probably long before August of 2021, I imagine.
I would say 2 points. One is the DOR agreement, because it was negotiated between the government of the United States and a State Department designated terrorist organization, the Taliban, and it was a bilateral agreement. That kind of pulled the rug out morale-wise from both the Afghan security forces and the government itself, because at that point they knew with certainty that there was a date certain now.
Right.
So I think that probably had a significant effect. Historians are going to have to figure out exactly what that effect is. The actual observable tipping point of the collapse of the Afghan military, et cetera, that clearly is in July. As you start looking at when provincial capitals start falling. The first provincial capital falls, I think it's 6 August, and then in the next 10 days, the rest of them start falling all the way to the capture of Kabul. But it's at the end of July, sort of right at the beginning of August, it becomes evident that the Afghan security forces are crumbling, and we are in it, and that's where the whole NEO thing comes up.
Thank
But
you.
that's about the timing.
All right, General
Gentleman's
McCauley, thank
time's
you for the extra time. I yield
expired.
back.
Chair recognizes